Alright. So, after quite a bit of tactical difficulty, looks like we're live. Great. Alright. It actually looks like it's picking up my mic, which is good. Let's get painting. Alright. Looking all nice and pale for y'all. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Get a little bit of my painting area set back up. That is quite a bit of technical difficulties. For some reason, my streaming software just decided to give up the ghost for a good 40 minutes. But that's all right. We're there now. So, just go ahead and launch right into it. We're picking back off of where we left off last time, which was painting this digitally kit bashed mini. I am painting for a friend of mine. He plays my Saturday night game, and one done, that's this character, is a fantastic character. I love him. I'm going to go ahead and recenter the camera so it's a little bit more comfortable for me. And there we are. And we're going to go ahead and fix a little chat thing on the side. And yeah. Alright. To painting. So we're going to start with a little bit of Brass Scorpion, going back over the areas we're started with, meaning this back right here, this pauldron. I'm going to go ahead and highlight back over it with some of the Brass Scorpion that we put on earlier. And this is after we've already thrown shade onto the miniature, being Nuln Oil from Citadel. And I also did Agrax Earthshade on the arm, leather, and metallics because I feel that those make metallics a little bit more metallic-y. Making sure to use a pretty thinned down paint. Kind of hitting all the high spots because, as I said last week, when you are painting a miniature, especially one as quickly as this, you want to focus all your highlights around the miniature's face to bring attention to it. It seems like I went a little too aggressive on this one. But it's the fun in painting. Tight areas, throw a little bit more highlights. Launching right into it. Doing highlights, you often want to bring the highlight all the way up to just before the recessed area on the miniature. I'm going to hit some of these whistles a little bit, making sure to use the edge of your brush so there's a little bit more control. By the edge of the brush, I mean the side of it, right here. You want to run it along the edge like so. That's how you get very clean edge highlights. keep on working on this thing. Making sure to just kind of hit the places I want to have pop. And remember, we don't want to go too far down this. Well, it's not a breastplate, so I guess gut plate? And that looks pretty good. A little bit more here. Let's scooch in a little bit more. Let me know if the music is a little too loud and I'm a little too quiet, anything like that. We're going to go with a little bit of the bone color, and we're going to do some highlights on the axe. Trying to hit mostly the edges. Thank you. Just a splash of flavor. Just gotta sprinkle on that seasoning on the miniature. This is often where most miniature painters, especially when you start out, would kind of go, oh, well, it looks good, I'm done. But as most miniature painters that paint in competitions would agree, is that a good paint job and a great paint job is only an hour apart. Just coming back and hitting all these small details, making them pop a little bit. Forgive me for not just I wish I could paint miniatures that way. Fortunately, that's not how it works. Oh, wait. If you lick a brush, or if you don't lick a brush, are you really even painting? Just keep going and hitting all these high spots, making sure to keep the light source consistent. Focus, bud. A little bit of Baylor Brown. A little bit of mix here for the vest. So a little lighter. All right. Back. So doing some of the highlights on the vest. Human saliva is the best at bringing all your bristles to a sharp point. And we're just gonna, again, we're really just hitting the high spots of the miniature. We're not going back over the entire thing. Just gonna hit some of the raised edges, maybe the top of this back right here. Make sure to try to keep a smooth paint job. Probably gonna glaze this a few times. Not too much. The superior lube, eh? Alright. Remembering to try to use the edge of your paintbrush to not get any little mistakes, like what I just did. Just trying to make some of the edges pop. Tapped my mic. Alright. I think we're getting somewhere right now. Just remembering to keep your highlights higher on the mini, not going over some of the lower spots at all, really. Oh, I just went out of frame completely. You know, I didn't even think you looked like that until you said that. But you'd have to ask him if that was the intended character. Alright. Though I do appreciate the compliment. Making sure that we're hitting all these raised edges. Gotcha. An accidental reference, which is somehow better. Exactly. An improvement. Alright. Just a tad. I think that's good on the vest. Maybe a little bit more. Keep some of the recessed shading in there. That's why I put it on after all. And yeah, just gonna kind of go into some of these little stitches. Oh, right. I think that kind of looks textured. It's a little bit lighter, starting to bring attention to the face. I say we move on to the arm, which is Oak Brown from RB Painter and Mornfang Brown from Citadel. Oh, that was a lot of paint. Well, I guess that is some of the scary stories you get in the basement, or tales from the basement. But can't say that I have very many. So unless you're talking about just like creepy, white-skinned, no-eyed creatures just staring at you from the darkness of the stairs. You know what? I think a dry brush will do good on this part in actuality. So we're gonna grab a flat brush. Spooky story or riot? Riot then. Unless you want to tell one. I mean, no one's stopping you from telling one in the chat. Alright, now we're just going to do a little bit of a dry brush over some of the wood of the arm. And then go back over and fix the green. Get a little lighter. Brian, of course you would riot. I'm not surprised at all. Hey, welcome guys, thanks for coming. Oh, come on. That's a pretty boring riot if you just say riot. Oh, Flesh Maze riot? Okay, that's a little bit more riot. Screaming children riot. I mean, I feel like that's just normal children behavior. So, is it really a riot? Because kids are anarchy, so... Just gonna hit this with some lighter and lighter dry brushes, just to bring out some of these details. Eyeless screaming children. Ugh. Now that's a spooky story. That is a disturbing image there. It's a very polite riot. But I mean... I'm ruining it? You guys just aren't rioting. I mean... We're almost done here on the arm. quiet, Riot. I believe those are called silent protests. Just filled with rage, but shh. Be quiet now. Alright. Go a little bit crazier of a highlight on this one, because I can. Try to get most of the paint off my brush. There we go. Really popping now. Unlike your Riot. Say that looks a bit more woody. If the camera would focus. Yeah, we still want this to read as a dark wood, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. Now, I'm going to go to this Lauren Forest green to pick out the vine on the arm once again. I mean, I'm looking, and I don't see a Riot, man. Really, I'm just waiting for some sort of GIF to be posted of the avatar from The Last Airbender, right? But we're gonna be picking out this vine while you quietly riot in the chat. You know, I think this green could be a fair amount darker. Oh, soon. Alrighty then. I can be patient. I'll wait. Alright, we're gonna go with a little bit of a darker green because this just isn't popping the way I want it to. Thanks, babe. What arm riot? Alright. Starting to get more of a vine in here. Yes, I was absolutely talking to you, Joey. Alright. Honestly, feeling pretty good about this arm right now. Alright. Again, I'm making sure to use the side of the brush where I can, as it gives me a much higher level of control over what the brush is doing. I mean, all right. Yeah. So now we're gonna hit some of these pouches. Just a bare minimum highlight here. Just to bring attention that there are indeed pouches under these rolls of fat. That it is actually different. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and hit some of this rope. Maybe this belt line. Just a little. We don't need a lot. Hit some of these stitches just to, once again, bring attention to them. Make sure that all the beautiful sculpting on this model, and I'm not just saying that because I digitally kit bashed it from like 4, are actually getting some attention. Alright. I think it's time I got some lead belcher on the palette. What does that say? Okay. No idea what that's supposed to mean, Joey. Alright, we're gonna hit some of these buckles. Make them pop a little bit. Oop. Get a little bit of a no there. Alright, once again, we're gonna be hitting some edges. Just trying to bring a little bit of brightness back up after doing our washes. Too young to understand. I haven't heard that one in a while. But, okay, Dad. Alrighty. Just gonna keep on hitting these high spots, making sure that we're getting the paint we want to. Again, I'm gonna keep saying it, is that we want to focus the highlights towards the face. We want to draw attention towards the center of the model, because if a model that doesn't have a focal point, you tend to get lost. You see me, I'm not really even hitting the models under. Yep, Joey's definitely my in real life dad. But I mean, like, at least my dad supports me. Alright. Back over these areas that got a little muddled from the wash. We're going to fix those up a bit. Close-up view at some point. Alright, let's see if the camera will actually focus. Oh, is it deciding to behave? Nope. Alright. How's that looking? Alright. Hitting some of the highlights again. Okay, hitting that buckle. Pop a little bit. Maybe gonna take some of this brass scorpion. Citadel back over the chains. Just to make them look a little bit more metallic. Just doing finger guns. All right. Liking these highlights, feeling pretty good about them. Alright. Thinking that's pretty good so far. Go with a little bit of blue. Try to fix this hat a little bit. Maybe not fix. Improve? Improve. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go ahead and get a little bit of white on the palette. And yes, I do use a non-hobby brand white paint. Mainly because I have not found a white hobby paint that is actually worth a damn. Pretty terrible, in my opinion. Citadel is probably the worst defender when it comes to whites, even though I'm a big fan of their purples and most of their other colors. But I just did about a 50-50 mix. Actually, probably more like 75 Altdorf Guard Blue and the Liquitex Heavy Body Titanium White to get this highlight. Remember, paint always dries a little bit more transparent than when you first put it on. So even though this looks pretty intense of a color, once it dries and we layer a little bit, it'll be pretty damn good. Yeah, I use non-hobby paints. I'm pretty cool. And those are some ropes down there, I think, just so they don't blend in. I'm gonna hit some of these. A little bit of brown, just to make sure they don't get lost. Thank you. This is about, I want to say 2.5 hours in. 2.5 hours into the paint job. Yeah. Alright, what else can I improve a little bit? I'm gonna go back over the axe a little bit because I'm just not thinking it's that good. Alright. And again, just kind of hitting the high spots, more highlights to get closer to the face. Gonna go with some Eshin Gray to re-highlight the hat. Probably mixed with a little Dawnstone to get a higher contrast. And for anybody wondering, I did transfer my Citadel paint into these bottles from the typical Citadel paint bottles, which are these. I hate these. They are so difficult to use. We're just going to hit the raised edges because this is behind the model and we still want to bring attention to the face. We're not going to do as much work on the back of the model as the front. And just keep on edge highlighting and hitting the high spots. A little bit of a shake there. Mixing a 50-50 Dawnstone and Eshin Gray to get this highlight. Really got a shake going on. How's everybody's week been? Mine has been pretty long. I happen to be sitting here hanging out with everybody. Alright, I'm thinking that hat is pretty close to being done because I still want it to read as dark gray. So I don't want to put too many highlights on it. Little bit of straight Dawnstone. Wipe off most of the paint because I want this to be a very light highlight. Just in the front. So you can see. Oh. Come on. Focus. It really doesn't want to focus. Man, he really doesn't want to focus. There we go. All right. What should we highlight next? Hit some of this fur. Feathers. So this character has traveled to quite a few cool locations. And as a side effect, one being losing his arm, and then having it returned to him from a dryad that he did a favor for. He also grew up in a island chain that really focused on how strong an individual was and the importance of the tribe. But he was born a weakling, but eventually found a magic item that increased his strength. He decided to travel the world seeking these items of power, and eventually one day come back to his tribe as a very strong individual that leads. I thought that was a great story beat, especially since this character was originally built for a one-shot. That this barbarian has a natural strength score of 9. And has currently a belt of Etten strength that brings his strength up to 21. I'm gonna hit this pouch with a little bit of a light color just to give it a couple scratches and dings. A little bit of texture. So one of the things with leather is that it's never quite smooth and perfect. I think that's pretty good. Just kind of doing some stippling. I'll probably come back over with a straight black or something to kind of accentuate some of the battle damage on this armor that's disappearing with some of my highlights. So, with that being said, go ahead and add black to my palette. Let this fairly thin. I like the consistency of milk. Just come back. A little bit. So, not trying to make it look black, just trying to give the idea of shadow again. There we go. A lot of painters have this whole recipe for making armor look weathered, which includes like nearly black metallics and layering. I think on most miniatures you don't need anything fancy like that, but to each their own. I definitely can't complain about their paint jobs. They're quite talented individuals out there that go to that level of effort. Move on to highlighting the scales. I think about a 70-30 mix of Caliban green and Lauren Forest green will give us the first highlight. When I was first thinking about doing this paint job and how I was going to paint it, I looked at reference photos and saw that the majority of saltwater crocodiles have a lighter underside than they do a top. However, the more I looked at this miniature, the less that seemed to make sense in terms of a paint job or what would look good. So I ended up deciding against that and just going for a relatively dark green overall. Sometimes you have to sacrifice accuracy for aesthetics. Again, focusing most of the highlights around and on the face. I'll say sure, this is D&D. In this world, crocodiles can absolutely tan. Are they essential hand oils? I don't know if they're essential. I see what joke you're going for, though. Just hitting the high spots again, working up to the actual opacity I want. This is where all the brush training that you've been working on the entire miniature really starts to come into play, as you just want to hit the high spots and not really the low. Not go over any of the areas you've already highlighted, because I don't like making more work for myself. But just slowly working up. And for those of you wondering why I'm not actually hitting the tail right now, I'm just going to go back over and dry brush it, as there's not a lot of other details close to it, and there's a lot of small detail work. Make sure I get some of these hands. Not to catch these hands. Alrighty. I think we're ready for our next little highlight here. Just going to be adding more of the Lauren Forest to the mix I already have, so now it's about a 50-50 of the Caliban Green and Lauren Forest. And when I'm moving up from to a lighter highlight on top of a highlight I've already done, I always make sure not to cover up the entire area I just did. I'm working in smaller and smaller areas to really like sell a gradual gradient. Sometimes you end up going over the same area in such a small increments of smaller and smaller space that it looks like you've wet blended the entire model. Not a fan of wet blending. I think it takes too long for the amount of effort you've put in, and the end result is pretty similar to what you can get from just standard layering techniques, as long as you have good brush control. Just again, hitting the high spots, working in ever smaller areas. Just about at 70% Lauren Forest and 30% Caliban Green. So we'll move up to one of our final highlights. I think as a general rule of thumb, when I'm painting a model like this, I don't want the paint job to take any longer than 3 hours. Again, we're mostly using the paint as a method of just accentuating what's already on the model. Part of that is making sure that you leave shadowed ridges even on the face, and you move in an idea of where the light is in your highlighting. It's kind of like contouring with makeup. Actually, it's not like. It's almost exactly like that. Remembering as you get higher on the model, you want more and more highlights. Might be another layer of highlights just on the face, but nowhere else. I'll give a close-up in just a second. So finish up this highlight. All right. Looks pretty darn good. To toot my own horn too bad. Notice as I get closer and closer to a finished highlight, I speak quieter and quieter. You notice that I'm keeping the ridge lines around here fairly dark. And that's mostly from just how I've been layering the paint. That's almost completely Caliban Green, and I've worked up by mixing the two paints to a higher and higher highlight. It really makes the contours of the face pop, or these bulges poking out from the skin. They get darker towards the chains. We're gonna keep going here. Keep on highlighting. This is honestly my favorite part of the miniatures, besides spacing. That honestly is my favorite. But when it comes to actually laying paint on the miniature, this is my favorite part. So you really see all the work you did earlier come to fruition. We're going to hit the feet a little bit to give them some differences with the base. You don't want it just completely disappear in shadow. This is not a Twilight miniature. Or to give more clarity to that statement, it's not like this miniature is in a Twilight environment. little bit of a higher highlight. Just kind of tapping it here and there. There's the idea of a brighter light source. So a lot of miniature painting is just making sure that you're getting across the right idea while painting. Go ahead and do some quick dry brushing on the tail. Really want these spines and such to pop, as they are such important details on an alligator. Crocodile. Alright. Again, similar when we're using the paintbrush to manually put all of these highlights and layers on, we're going to be working up from the different mixtures I have pre-made to highlight individual scales. You could go over all of these individually, but again, I honestly don't think it's worth all the extra time if you're not painting for a competition. I think people often put too much focus on the fancy painting techniques when they can get something just as good on something easy. Make it a little bit of lighter here. Again, making sure to have less and less paint on our brush as we get higher and higher highlights with the dry brush. That's the way we control the highest points of contact, is by having a drier dry brush. You only hit smaller and smaller areas. Alright, I think I'm going to go for just straight green. Really get the paint off the brush at this point. So we get the highest highlight on the tail. I'm going to go back over the skin areas. Make sure I put a gloss coat of Army Painter gloss medium over the entire scale area to really sell that these are scales, not just a skin tone. So I think that's something that can be really lost when you're doing scales, reptilian creatures, dragonborn, that sort of thing, is that it begins to look like every other material. And by using different mediums to get different finishes, you can really sell what material it is that you painted. Now we're getting somewhere. Now you can really see where the individual scales are. Now let's go ahead and dry brush on the snout a little bit to really sell the highlights. Alright. So we're actually pretty close to done on this thing. this guy. Thinking. Start a little bit of yellow. Mix it with a little bit of the red. Get an orange to highlight the red on the axe. So I feel like that is not getting the attention it deserves. I prefer highlighting reds with oranges because, well, if you add white to red, you get pink. It no longer looks red. Using the side of my brush, trying to get all those peaks and none of the valleys. Add a little bit more yellow to get a little bit higher pigmentation. Just again with the side of my brush, trying to only hit the high spots. Thinking that's looking pretty good. Almost like it's on fire. Got the individual scales on the tail done. Starting to look a little bit more cohesive. And you notice all my highlights bring your attention to the face of the model, to the top. Barely looking down right now. Alright, let's hit some of the stripes on the pants with just a patch of blue and gray. We're honestly almost there. A little bit here. Just make sure it looks blue. Once in a while, you gotta fix your posture. There we go. Thinking it's time to throw some gloss medium on his skin, then move on to basing. I say that. I've said that a few times, and then I go back, just add a couple more little highlights, bring attention to things that otherwise just kind of look muddy. Not quite correct. Again, we're going to mix a little bit of the Baylor brown, a little bit of the Morghaz bone to get the color for the vest. So we don't want it to look exactly like the axe in his hand. Trying to sell that this is a textured shirt, so I keep going, moving my brush in slightly different directions, using a little bit drier paint to give a textured look. Right. Yeah, let's go ahead and grab some of the gloss medium. Just put it over his scales. when we get to the basing, we're going to go ahead and put all the grasses and stuff down. And then usually after that point is when I'll go back over the miniature and see what other things I can make it pop. For instance, on most barbarians, I had a hell of a lot of blood. So I'm probably going to do the same thing here. But I want to make sure it's after all the basing is done, after all that is complete. So if I do any actual spatter effects, it looks like the blood splattered on the ground as well. So remember, we're trying to sell an idea, story here, and by having it a cohesive idea, we make it a little bit better. Make sure it makes sense. Though I know this is D&D and it doesn't always make sense. But just adding the glass coat here, making sure that this is going to sell as reflective scales, even though in nature crocodiles aren't necessarily reflective. Make sure I get some of this on the armor itself. Alright. We're going to move on to basing. Now this one is, in my opinion, the most fun you can have while painting the miniature. Grab a couple different types of grass, a little bit of super glue, throw that on my palette, though always be careful when you throw super glue on your palette, because I, on more than one occasion, have dipped my brushes in said super glue. Always sucks. I'm just going to pull off a couple tufts here. Make sure it's in the right orientation. And go ahead. I like putting the tufts of grass near rock formations. It makes the most sense in my mind. But, in all honesty, there's no really wrong way to do this. I'm going to go with some of this more dead-looking brush. Because he is from a jungle, you can actually get this craft moss paper stuff from Michael's. I don't know or remember what it's called, but it's fantastic for setting up moss on the ground, really selling the undergrowth and creeping vines. So again, dipping that in the super glue. Careful about getting super glue on your hands. Let's not put my arm in covering the entire camera. There we go. Grab the other one. You know, in all honesty, I don't think it needs the other one. I think that is about as busy as it will get while looking good. So I'm gonna grab some of my super glue accelerant. This Instacure super glue, which is a lifesaver and time saver. So that's the base. We're gonna wait for that to dry a little bit. While that's drying, I like to go back over the miniature, make sure I haven't missed anything. I think I'm going to put some gloss medium on the wood arm. Just to sell. Just for some reason, things look more like wood when you throw lacquer on them. Sure, there's a reason for it. I just don't know it. Try not to get too much sitting in the recesses, as that can ruin all the highlighting you just did. Just gonna switch to a thicker brush, really, so I can wick more of this paint off. As soon as I find it. There we go. All right. Let's see if that's dry. Yep. So now we think about some of the more specialized stuff. Meaning, do we want to add oxidation to the brass here? Do we want to add blood? Do we want to add any rust? He is a pirate, so that is going to be a concern for any metallic items. So I'm thinking I'm going to grab some of this teal and water it down quite a bit. I'm looking for something thinner than milk. Almost a wash, really. I'm just going to go in. Just hit some of these. Then I'm just going to wipe it. Take it off. For the most part, because we're just giving the hint of what's going on here. Just want it to look just ever so slightly oxidized. This paint is drying instantly. I think I need to switch to a slightly different teal. This one is drying far too quick. Again, adding a fair amount of water. We want this pretty runny. Some recesses. Again, we don't want it to just look like we painted teal into these areas. We want it to look pretty subtle. So. I think that's good on the teal. We're going to go with some dry rust from Army Painter. It's purposely flaky. Just going to hit that on some of the steel. I know this character keeps a gives his weapons and armor a fair amount of care, as he is the bosun. But it is the ocean. Alright. There's not that many metallics on here. We're good on that. We are now to the fun part, which is blood. Oh, that did not mix at all. If you hear any of the clicking in the bottle, that is simply the stainless steel ball bearings I've thrown in each of my bottles to help with mixing. Now I like mixing the Army Painter Glistening Blood with the Citadel Blood for the Blood Gods for a pretty specific reason. Blood for the Blood Gods dries looking like old blood. It does not dry looking like new blood. And the Army Painter Glistening Blood is far too pink to be sold as blood. So mixing the two together, you get a really nice, like, fresh blood just on the cusp of coagulating. That it just really sells it. And I like to throw some blood on the base to sell that he's been killing people and will continue to kill people. And because it's fun, and the idea of a wooden arm punching through a body, I'm going to hit this arm with some blood. Don't have to be too careful with this because when you're stabbing people, blood goes everywhere. There's a little bit of splatter on his chest, vest. Spikes of his armor, his hand, because axes are bloody weapons. I know he bites people in battle, so we're going to go ahead and put some on his teeth. So we really want to sell. This is a Path of the Beast barbarian. Making sure we get both sides of the axe. Alright, it's really easy to overdo how much blood you throw in a miniature, so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I think this miniature, I'm going to hit his eyes to get some of the brightness back up. As every miniature painter knows. Oh god, eyes. Alright. Starting to look feral again. Do a close-up. With that, we're going to paint the base black and call this mini done. Just by using the good old Abalone Black. Citadel. Give me some coverage. And I'm using the side of my brush because I'm trying not to poke at it and accidentally hit any of the details that are already done. Alright. With that, one done. The Lizardfolk Barbarian Path of the Beast is done. So, gonna go ahead and take an intermission and probably spend a little bit of time base coating a secondary miniature. Alright, see you guys in about 10 minutes. Thanks for coming. Alright, we are back. And as you can tell, or maybe you can't tell, I've actually changed out what miniature I'm going to be painting. I'm now going to be painting my wife's character from the same campaign as the miniature I just finished. One done. But this is Odette, a battlemaster fighter that focuses primarily on gunslinging. I've already based it with some sand and based the model on one of my magnet bases that I actually print and use. Yeah, we're just going to go ahead and move right on to using the Vallejo brush-on primer. This is my preferred method of priming because I don't actually have to get back up out of my seat, spray something with a rattle can or aerosol can of primer, and then wait for it to dry. Brush this on, and in about 5 minutes, have a model that's ready for painting. So we're just going to quickly move into getting this all primed. Now we actually going to use a little bit of an older brush, one that I don't care about quite so much. Just trying to get every nook and cranny with this. The reason I usually use a bit of an older brush, well-loved brush, is if there's any little bits of super glue, if I had just glued the model onto the base, I don't want to ruin one of my nice pointy brushes by accidentally dipping it in super glue. As you can tell, this doesn't take that much time, and overall, it usually takes more time than an aerosol can because waiting so long to actually get to the painting process while it's drying. Just like that, this model, Odette, is ready for paint. Seems like the camera is having a hard time focusing on it. This is Odette. This is a character from the same campaign as One Done, played by my wife. She plays a gnome, just said it, battlemaster fighter, who uses a gun. So I'm actually going to pull up some reference art here. Just a moment. Yeah, pretty much. Though she has a bit of a foresight that she isn't just going to shoot at things. She'll let them hang themselves with enough rope first. Let's go with... There we go. Okay. Just closed it. Alright, so we're going to start with the hair. That seems like the most fun. She's a bit of a redhead. So we're going to go ahead and start with some Evil Sun's Scarlet for the hair. Add that to my shopping list because I'm pretty much out. Now, at first glance, this will seem like a very bright red, which it is, but after you apply your wash and then do some of the highlighting, it will actually come out as more of like an auburn slash mid-tone red. And typically when I'm setting down all of my base coats, I just block them in. I'm not super careful about getting onto different areas unless there's already paint on them. This is more about just making sure that I get paint on the model so I have something to build from. This is a Hero Forged model. I did not kit bash this. That was actually designed by my wife. Alright, switch to a thin brush. Looking at the art here, there's a cream blouse. So we're just going to go with some of the bone color we used earlier for the blouse. Wasn't quite dry. I mean, that's just good tactics. That way they also can't run away. Gonna keep the stream going till about 10 to 30. Is the next song gonna start? Dry in. Let's get some flesh tone. We're gonna go with Kislev flesh. I know I'm butchering all of these pronunciations. this is where you get a little careful. So there's already paint on the hairline. I'm going to keep it as clean as possible, saving us work. This isn't really the time to get super careful. Honestly, your wash and shades will hide a lot of the mistakes you make at this stage. There's always this point where your miniature does not look great. I'll say that usually lasts until you do the first wash. Working, getting paint on the model. Alright, so pants are dark gray. I'm going to go back to the Ashen gray I used earlier on the one-done model. It's not going to show up super well on the dark gray primer I put on, but it is there. Alright. Those are base coated. So it's going to be dark brown on the boots. So we're going to go with some of the Morn Fang brown. These boots. They're pretty buried in the sand now. Deciding it's probably going to be a beach. Boots sink to the sand. Probably drinking rum, coffee. It's one or the other. Speaking of which, some paint on the face. Make sure it's nicely framed. Making sure to not lose too many details because the flesh can be quite thick. There we go. Make sure we get some on the neck, the jaw. So her corset is blue, so we're gonna go with, let's go with some Cantor blue. Gonna be a little dark. I'm gonna put a little white on my palette. Ooh, that was way too much. Take a little bit of the white. So a bit of the blue. And we get a nice creamy lighter blue. Alright. So, black hooded cape, I'm going to say that that's what's tied around her waist. Flannels from the 90s style. So I'm going to get some necromancer cloak from Army Painter. It comes out. Luck. Throw a little bit of black on my palette as well. Things a little bit of differentiation. This music sounds like Super Mario Brothers. No, it's not. That is very thick. Holy crap. There we go. So I think a bit usable. I'm gonna grab some bay or brown. Get the fringe of this cloak thing around her waist. Have like a bit of a fur fringe. Starting to get somewhere. Fix a little bit of little mistakes. Happy little accidents. Gotta keep throwing on some coats onto the shirt because it's just not reaching opacity as I would like. Alrighty. Let's use our brown. Mix it with a little bit of Valor to give a little bit of variety. Alright, I'm pretty happy with the progress we're making on this thing. Paint on my hands. Go back, fix the hair every once in a while. Do eyes. I like to fill in the entire socket with black. Usually makes them a little terrifying in the beginning, but it works out in the end. For this rope belt, we're going to go with some Valor Brown. Always fan of when they don't answer you immediately, then you kneecap them, just to let them know that you mean business. But kneecapping them off the bat, then you just look crazy and that you can't be reasoned with. Alright. I think a little dry enough to actually do the eyes. So, water here in my white. Ooh, wow, that one very brown. That's true. Sometimes crazy can be good. water. Clean water, that is. Mixing white, it's very easy to have it be affected by the water in your cup. Okay. So the way I do eyes is just glob on white on one side of the eyes. I just completely ignore the other side. And I do it to where both eyes get white to the same side of the model. So in this instance, the white is on this side of the model, on both sides. That way, I get a directional look, pretty low effort. Then I'll slowly shape it in to where the black looks more like a pupil. It's not so square. Majority of the time I have to come back with some black, fill it back out, as I did too much white, but it's kind of a balancing act. Then, before we get too much further on it, we wait for it to dry, look at some other parts of the mini. Mainly, I'm just concerned about getting this model base coated tonight. And I would 100% agree that being small and sneaky can also be useful, if not more so. Alright, I'm going to throw some lead belcher on my palette. As always. Alright, we're actually getting pretty darn close to washing this model. Throw a little bit more black in the pupil. Being up close and personal is a very dangerous thing to do. Alright, now with the eyes, now that they're looking suitably bug-like, we're going to come back with skin tone and shape them. some of this white. As ever with eyes, you just keep going back and forth. It's not a sharp tip. Skin tone. Now, looks like Odette is lucky in a single direction. Some of this stitching on her corset. Nice black. I'm wondering what color this mug should be. Make it a wooden mug, computer mug. Let's mix that with a little bit of Baylor brown to get a little variation between the leather holster and the handle of the gun. At this point, I'm mostly cleaning up the model in order to do the wash, fixing any little mistakes I made, deciding if this is really how I want to do the model, deciding that I'm going to mix a little bit of the flesh tone and a little bit of the red for the hair to get a kind of fleshy pink, and pick out starting to look a little flat. A little bit of cleanup because I am not great at putting lipstick on. red to help clean up the hairline. Let's go ahead with the hair tie. All right. I think we're almost there. Let's go ahead and pull out some of the Talon sand by Citadel. And some carrot stone by Citadel. Both next to each other on the palette because I like mixing two different sand and stone tones while I'm doing sand, so there's actually some variation. It's not all just the same. Just Talon sand and the carrot stone. So we kind of work it around the base because there is a lot of paint on here. It's going to take a while to dry. So I like doing this before I'm really done cleaning up the model and I still have a few details to pick out. So it makes I feel easier if everything's dry around the same time. Let's fix what I just did to her pants. Sure what to do about this mug. I think I'm going to use some of the carrot stone to make it look more like a clay mug. That's too much light tones together, so I'm actually going to pull as much as I can off of that. I think I'm actually going to make it a brass scorpion copper bronze mug. Just add a little bit of variety. I like that. I'm going to use my pin drill and actually make the mug a little deeper. So, just about 45 minutes. I have base coated Odette. soon as this sand dries, I'm going to be throwing a wash on, and we're going to be calling it a night. The wash usually takes around 45 minutes to dry. I think that's just a little boring. Pulling up excess. Love it if the camera actually focused. Getting anything? There's a little bit of a button here. So there we go. Boop. Excuse me. Alright, I say we go ahead and wash. Just some olive oil. I'm going to be careful not to get it on the sand here, because that seems like it's going to take a little bit longer to dry. And this stuff does have the tendency, if the paint is not fully dried, to pull it up. We're just going to hit this whole bottle with a wash. And I typically go a little heavy on the wash in the beginning, and then I'll go back and forth with a brush that's been wiped off and siphon off any extra that's sitting a little too heavy in any recessed areas, or I know that I'm going to be going back over that area for highlights. I'll go ahead and whisk off some of the wash to make my life a little easier later on. So that is pretty much covered. Now I'm going to rinse all the wash out of my brush, dry it off, and then come back in these recesses that I don't want so much in there, and whisk it off, especially in like the eyes that I put so much work into. Put the whole 5 minutes into them. Just soak up some of this extra. Since I'm going to be highlighting back in the top portions of the hair, so I'm going to whisk off a bit more from that than in the recesses right there. That's just a little too much. Starting to mar up some of the detail work. But we don't want to take so much off that it's not actually doing anything for us. So just a little bit there. Still want it to look like there's folds, so I'm not going to take too much out of those. But here, because it's a light blue, that's pretty obvious, I'm going to pull a significant amount off. Go ahead and try pushing some back into the hair. Off here. There. So even though this isn't the gloss Nuln Oil, which I think is useful in other ways, this does dry pretty glossy if it is too clumped together or too heavy in some spots, and that's not something you want. You're going to have pretty good control over your finished surface finish, like matte, satin, or glossy. I think that is pretty good. We're going to set just over there. With that, we're going to call an end to the stream as we just finished washing Odette. Alright. I'm going to call that the end of the stream. Thanks for coming out tonight, guys. There are, in the description, you'll find a few ways how to support the channel. I gotta tell you that some of the links down below for some of these suggested products are affiliate links. If you buy anything there, you'll get a little bit of a kickback. Other than that, thanks for hanging out. Peace.